Hey, good morning. I'm Jimmy Granberry, Chairman of the Nashville Chapter of the ULI. And we appreciate everybody coming this morning. And sorry for the shortened happy hour, but we wanted to have more time for the candidates, so I'm sure everybody will understand. On your chairs, you'll find our program scheduled for the upcoming months, and we hope you'll take notice. We'll forego with those announcements. Also, our annual sponsors on the right over here, please take note. Sponsorships have been great this year, as everybody knows, and we're really happy that everybody's paying forward for the ULI chapter. I think this is probably about as important of a meeting as this chapter will hold this year for the future of Nashville, and we get to hear what the candidates have to say. Interestingly, up on the podium, I don't think this was put here on purpose, but it says we're now hiring poll officials, so apply today. So if anybody needs a little extra income for the spring, you can apply for these polls. I'd like to thank our committee. They did a marvelous job. Ashley Dane, Haley King, Brett Malone, Tabitha Crawford. They did a fabulous job putting the questions together for the candidates. We've got a great format today, and I want to just thank them. All the committees do a wonderful job. There's just so much behind the scenes work that goes on. Also, Rose, our chairman in the back, our executive director. I will tell you a little bit of good information for our chapter. As we, under Laura's leadership, we're going to get to 400 before my term expires in a year. Rose is submitting our budget for this year, and I know Bert Matthews would be really proud that we have, in the budget this year, Rose is going to go full time. So that's a big, big step for ULI and our Nashville chapter. We're a shining light in Georgetown. The way we're growing, our budget is fabulous, and we're just really happy of y'all's participation, sponsorship, membership, et cetera, et cetera. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Tabitha, who's going to lead the program today. And don't forget, I've got the information up here if you need to sign up for the polls. Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks, Jimmy. First, I would like to thank our candidates for being here today and our ULI members. It's going to be a lot put into a little bit of time today, so we're going to move swiftly, and it's my job as moderator to make sure that we get through the questions that were carefully crafted by our committees and our action councils that represent about 350 leaders here in Middle Tennessee. A few things first, though. Coming from a construction and development company, safety is something we need to talk about very briefly before we start. Should an emergency arise, and we don't think it will, unless Jimmy doesn't get the rest of his coffee, we have two exits. We want you to use the primary exit where you came in by registration. If that's too crowded, you may exit through this door, and there's a hallway to lead to the exterior. As he said, the Davidson County Election Commission is here. If you'd like to register, or if you'd like to sign up to help with them, we do encourage that. They are going to be here after. Due to the nature of our very brief time period we have today, the candidates will be available for a brief time after for comment. If you'd like to follow up with them, please do so. We will be asking 5 questions. There are 6 listed on your guide that you have today. We'll be asking the first 5. The 6th, we'll get your responses and post those on our website. We did that for time purposes today. I ask that you turn your ringers off, but tweet us. If you have a comment, over there's our hashtag, ULI vote. Tell us what you think. If something strikes you as unusual, if you want to know more about it, if we're doing a great job, if my hair looks funny, put anything you want out there. But we want to create some excitement, and I know we are excited today to have these 7 fine candidates with us. Thanks again to the committee, to Rose and Jimmy for pulling this event together. It was a lot of hard work, but so far, so good. ULI Nashville members represent the entire spectrum of real estate development and land use principles in public, private, and nonprofit within our sector. Various committees crafted these questions carefully, and they're very pointed. So while you may have seen similar questions in other forums, we ask that your responses be pointed as well. Candidates, I ask that you raise your hands because not everyone in the back of the room will be able to see your name tags as I call your name and introduce you to the audience. Ms. Megan Berry, Mr. Charles Robert Bone, Mr. Bill Freeman, Mr. David Fox, Mr. Howard Gentry, Mr. Jeremy Kane, and Ms. Linda Rebrovick. You know, I was emceeing a panel for someone from New York City, Philadelphia, and Kansas City in December, and it was all I could do to keep them from killing each other during the event, right? This is like the nicest candidate panel I have ever seen. I've seen them in a couple of forums now, and they take turns, and they're nice, and they even speak to each other. So I think that says a lot about the spirit of Nashville and about the leadership and the professionalism of each of them. So we thank you. So the committee drew names today and assigned a random order so that someone wasn't going first all of the time and someone stuck going last. We'll begin with Mr. Fox and the first question, and then rotate the first respondent to make sure everyone has equal time. Each candidate, you have 2 minutes to say your piece. Then Trent Strobel will hold up a sign with 30 seconds left when you have that much time remaining. Brett Malone will call time once time is up. If he calls time, we ask that you please finish your sentence and let the next candidate participate at that time. Remember, if we all make the whole world our stage, there's nowhere for the audience to sit. Think about that. Just say it. So our first question is around transportation this morning. It's from the Parking Action Council. And here we go. Parking and traffic issues, including congestion, are often a consequence of a vibrant, healthy economy. How would you address traffic and parking challenges facing Nashville, especially in some of our more popular commercial urban neighborhoods, like 12 South, Germantown, and East Nashville? Mr. Fox?
Thanks, Tabitha, and thanks to ULI. Y'all are a very important group to this, to our city and our built environment, and thank you for your contribution, and thanks for having your seminars. For those of us who are not in the construction and development business, it's been a very helpful way for some of us to kind of improve our understanding of all these issues. The challenges of transportation and parking are high-quality issues for us. When you talk about areas like 12 South and East Nashville, these are areas that have actually come together with multi-use. They're places where you can live, work, places of employment, and retail. And that's sort of the type of communities, the nodes around the city we're trying to develop. So now that we actually have a critical mass in these very popular areas, the issue is how do we connect them? For the last 50 years, it's been by car. Now that our population density is growing, clearly that's not going to be the mechanism to get us there, and that brings us very logically to mass transit. We can have a very public, transparent conversation about the best way to bring about mass transit. I suspect Mayor Dean was probably on the right path. I think a bus system, whether it's bus rapid transit or just an improved approach, is probably the way we would want to move forward on something like that and connect these nodes that are existing around the city. As you know from the Nashville Next program, that was the preferred scenario for the development of our city. And that makes sense, because to have sustainable mass transit, you have to have these clusters of places where you work, live, and shop. Otherwise, you're not going to take it to a destination and sort of get stranded. So that's really the main ways. There's some stopgap measures. I know there's the possibility of building parking facilities off behind the main arteries in 12 South and other areas, but these are really just stopgap measures. The key is how to reduce car traffic over the long haul. That'll be the real solution. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Kane.
Thank you, Tabitha. Thank you to ULI members for coming out this morning. I think we have to approach this problem two ways. One is we know what doesn't work. We know adding more parking, we know adding more lanes does not work. When we look at 12 South in Belmont and Hillsborough, we see some creative solutions that are already starting to happen. We see a dense environment, we see a very walkable environment, and we see some creativity starting to emerge. So when we talk about parking solutions, we should look at places like NBA, what they've done with their parking garage and putting their soccer field or green space on top of it, or integrating and using our school space as the new Waverly Belmont School is using, where when people do need to park and do need to come to a neighborhood and are there, that they have creative solutions that are off the street. And again, we're not putting more concrete on the ground, but using existing solutions in a creative way. But most people don't live in neighborhoods like 12 South or Hillsborough Village. And so when they come there, that goes to the mass transit question. So three things that we need to do. Increase the user experience to make it easier to use the bus. Right now, 80% of people who ride our transit system are those who need it rather than those who want it. So how do we make it accessible and easy and frequent? Second, we need to invest in a comprehensive system, starting with a major spine, whether that's Murfreesboro Road in the BRT Light program or an AMP-like project along Charlotte. Then third, and most importantly, we need to start thinking regionally within our own county, not just Middle Tennessee, where we talk about adding transfer stations throughout the county to provide more corridor service so that more people can get throughout the county on a bus rather than a car.
Thank you, Tabitha, ULI. Excited to be here today with all of you. Great question, parking, traffic as it relates to 12 South, Germantown, and East Nashville. You know, I'm going to lean on my experience of 39 years working with IBM, KPMG, and Dell, solving these types of complex problems with solutions we can implement right now. And what I learned is in a solid methodology, you look at three things. You look at people, you look at process, and you look at technology. So if we start with people, it means whatever we do, the community is going to be involved in the solution. And my hat's off to ULI and the Parking Action Council because you recommended putting together a committee that focuses on parking. I think that should be integrated with our MTA, our Transit Commission and committees, because these are very, complementary solutions and problems that we've got to address. So I would start there. And I think plans are nothing. Planning is everything. And that's a great place to start. When we look at process, we've got to look at how to improve transportation, which you just heard about, rapid transit, bikeways, and pathways. But the interesting thing about these areas is they all have heavy retail and restaurants in them. So a lot of people coming in at night. So why not work with businesses to make sure that we can co-share the parking spaces? And so at night, people coming into those areas can go right into those parking lots that belong to the businesses, and then that's a win-win for everybody. The other thing is innovative technologies. And hopefully you've heard me talk a lot about smarter Nashville and smarter technology, and this is a perfect place for smarter grids. And what that means is we use sensors for parking spaces that sensor where parking spots are so we don't drive around for 40 minutes looking for a parking space. It means sensors on traffic lights, real-time adaptive sensors to respond to traffic so you move through. This is all about making a smarter Nashville work.
You know, I sat in Sunday morning, I had to go to an early church service, and I sat at a traffic light with no traffic in sight. I was on trying to merge onto West End, no traffic in either direction, and sat through an entire cycle of a traffic light. And I thought about what you said and quoted it to the people in the car with me. It's a great idea, and I'm going to steal it and implement it.
Wait a minute. Tabitha just said we were nice.
But it is a great idea, and that's the kind of smart solution that we need to be thinking about. You know, we're probably 10 years late in working on a traffic solution, a mass transit solution. The problem is probably going to take, the solution is going to take 10 years to implement. So we're 20 years behind in solving our traffic problems. I don't know about each of you, but traffic today, in my opinion, is worse than it was 6 months ago. And traffic was worse 12 months ago than it was 6 months ago. You can literally see the traffic getting worse and a bigger problem every single month. We used to be called the 15-minute city. You could go anywhere in Nashville in 15 minutes. Those days are long gone. Now we might be the 45-minute city, maybe the 60-minute city, depending on which end of the county you're trying to get to. I have looked at cities around the country and what they've done, and one of the things that has been most interesting to me, and I'll just pass this article on to you in Vox magazine about what Houston has done. And they've totally re-engineered their bus system and their public transit system. It didn't cost any money. They just looked at where people are going today versus where they were 20 or 30 or 40 years ago when they first attempted to solve the problem. They've re-engineered their bus system. It's a workable solution. They've solved that problem in Houston.
Ms. Hahn.
Why we work on a mass transit system.
Mr. Bone, please.
Having lived here my entire life, it's easy to say that traffic today is worse than it was a month ago, worse than it was 6 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I think everybody shares that same experience regardless of how long you've been in Nashville. Last Thursday afternoon, I had to go from Cool Springs at 5 o'clock to the other side of Goodlettsville. The person with me said, this is the first time I've ever been to Sumner County. I said, well, actually, this is not in Sumner County. This is in Davidson County. But we hear all the time, we don't want to become the next Atlanta. Well, that afternoon, the hour and 20 minutes it took me to get literally from one side to the other, I felt like I was in Houston, not Atlanta. So I think we all know, both from our own experiences, but also statistically, that traffic's getting worse. TomTom, who has the GPS mapping services through your car and also through your phones, et cetera, aggregates their data on a regular basis to look at traffic, to look at congestion. They ranked Nashville 33rd worst for congestion. That may not sound bad if you think that's 33rd out of the southeast or out of the country, but that was 33rd out of the western hemisphere. So it's clear that we've got some traffic issues in Nashville. But we also have to recognize that Nashville is unique. We're one of 6 cities where we have 3 interstates that connect through Nashville. We're within 600 miles for 50% of the population. We also have an environment that's changing rapidly. We had 12.5 million visitors here in 2013, which was up 8 or 10% from 2012. We know 2014 was up over that. If you look just at what we've done from taxi permits in the last 3 years, we've gone from 580 taxi permits to 1,324 and probably have at least that many Uber or Lyft drivers on the streets. I don't think we're going to build our way out of this in the traditional sense. I don't think we're going to synchronize our way out of this. We have to look at some efficiencies that can bring more capacity to the roadways we currently have, but in the long term, we have to reduce demand. And the way we reduce demand is to increase funding, to increase ridership, and increase efficiency. We can do that currently through some of the work that MTA is doing, but also we're going to look at a long-term mass transit plan that I know we'll have the opportunity to talk about later.
Okay, Ms. Berry.
Good morning. I'm so used to looking at this particular stage and watching the Planning Commission, for those of you who tuned in to Channel 3. The question's about traffic and parking, and I want to talk specifically about those two things, because I think our approach in the past has been to lay down more asphalt and to build more parking garages. And we have to get people out of their cars. And there are lots of ways that we're going to do that, and we're going to talk, I think, specifically about the mass transit components of that. But let's focus back on traffic and parking for a second, because at the moment, people aren't getting out of their cars. And we don't make it easy for people to get out of their cars because we don't have a mass transit system that picks you up where you are, takes you exactly where you want to go, and then comes back and gets you. Uber and Lyft are doing that really well, but our mass transit is not. When you look at the Waverly Belmont School that just came online in the 12th Avenue South neighborhood, when we talk about 12th Avenue South and Hillsborough Village and East Nashville, those are walkable neighborhoods, and people want to live there because of their walkability, because they're surrounded by retail. Unfortunately, though, the retail isn't supported just with the people who live in that neighborhood. So people get in their cars and they drive to Jenny's Ice Cream and stand in line for 2 hours. It's kind of crazy. But Those parking pieces have to go somewhere. So with the Waverly Belmont School, when we talked about that, there was an opportunity to put more parking in that neighborhood, but the neighbors didn't want it. So we are going to end up with 62 spaces, which is about what we had to begin with. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there were 13 proposals for parking on the table for that particular piece. So we have to do what we know does well. The Music City connector at the moment will take you all around for free. We have the Route 76 over in Madison. It's a connector. It connects neighborhoods, and that works really well. Green Hills wants a connector. I've talked to them. Edge Hill wants the Music City connector because they want to ride for free. There's lots of opportunities of things we already do well to expand, and I think that's what we need to do.
It's time.
I saw it coming.
Mr. Gentry?
I already see it coming. The fact is that, you know, since I served on the Metro Council a few years ago, we were talking about traffic. We were talking about growth. As Vice Mayor, I heard it, I saw it. We actually passed legislation dealing with these coming concerns. At the chamber, we talked about, when I was there, we talked about how this city is going to grow and how millions of people are going to come into the region. And you would think that with all that discussion, and that we would have a plan. You would think that with all that discussion, if we do have a plan, that we would implement the plan. Who develops a 12 South without a plan for parking and traffic? Who develops a Germantown without a plan for parking and traffic? The fact is that it happened. It happened, and that's where we are right now. Maybe we did have a plan, but it's not implemented. And so you ask, what would I do? We would go back to a planning stage, and we would have a transportation management plan and a parking management plan that will be implemented, that will work. Because eyes are now on Jefferson Street, eyes are on Madison, eyes are on Dixon Road, eyes are on Nolensville Road. We can't do this again. We're going to have to create a system that can accommodate it, an environment that can accommodate it, and not move forward until we have these things well thought out and ready to be implemented. So, as mayor, I will develop a plan for transportation and a plan for parking that will work and will be implemented.
Thank you. Moving on to our second question. It's about housing, and it's from our Urban Magnets Council. You know, I work in the UK about every other month, and when I'm there, it never ceases to surprise me two things that people say when they see my business card from Nashville. Well, first of all, they know I speak Tennessean. I'm bilingual, not just English, but also speak Southern. Secondly, our city's been dubbed the IT City, which is pretty cool, and it makes me proud. They say, you know, I've seen how it's been growing. It's been in the press a lot. And what always comes across is the Nashville television show. Is the riverfront really like that? Are those characters really like that? Tell me what the Ryman looks like. So Nashville has a lot of great publicity, not just nationally, but internationally. That doesn't always mean that affordability remains where it needs to be for the citizens that live here now and for the ones that come in the future. So with our popularity as a destination and its many successes, affordability remains a challenge to our workforce, our small businesses, and our residents. Will your administration address affordable housing and affordable commercial development space in Nashville, and what tools or policy recommendations might you suggest to promote market-based or public policy for affordability? And this time, Mr. Kane, would you lead the responses?
Absolutely. I heard Bill talk about being a 15-minute town, and it reminded me my parents decided to move to Nashville almost 30 years ago because of the affordability. They knew they could afford a home down in southeast Davidson County and afford to send my brother and sisters and me to public schools. Talked with some of the business owners here this morning grabbing coffee, and that is still one of the attractive pieces of Nashville that brings people here, but it's not a guarantee to continue. Every debate we get, 1 million people are coming to Nashville. What are we going to do about it? And I always answer the question is, they're not guaranteed. Because if we don't have that affordability, that mass transit, public education, folks won't choose to come to Nashville. So what can we do? When we talk about housing, we have to talk about affordability, accessibility, and being able to attain that housing. So let's talk about abundance. Right now, within our apartments, we have a 96+% capacity. We need more housing stock. How do we do that? We need to fully fund the Barnes Fund. I have a plan to use the parking fees from Metro property to fund that. $3 million every year guaranteed to get us started. Second piece is variety. If we look at the neighborhoods that aren't affordable, they have one type of housing stock, either the Gulch, where you have a lot of apartments or condos, or Belmead, where you have a lot of big homes on big lots. So how do we create that variety? We work with developers just like yourselves to provide that variety. I tell the story all the time and embarrass Jimmy Granberry. In our neighborhood in Sylvan Park, we were having a trouble or challenge with folks coming in, developers tearing down houses and putting up new houses, until we started having apartments being developed in the neighborhood where those developers had some competition. Last thing, and most importantly, is accessibility. Through transit, making sure that every neighborhood is accessible, which means that more people can live there and can get there, making more housing obtainable.
As your mayor, I will do what Nashville does best to solve this affordability issue that we have in both housing, and I applaud you for asking about businesses too, and that is about coming together at the table. What we have to do, excuse me, is bring the developers, the neighborhoods, citizens of our community, Metro teams together, realtors, everyone needs to be working on the solution, and everybody should be part of that consensus. That's how you solve it, not by surprising each other and driving each other apart. That doesn't work. Starting with businesses, I understand firsthand about affordable commercial space. My company, Consensus Point, was renting a sublease. We were so lucky 3 years ago we found a sublease for a very affordable cost. Guess what happened 3 years later when the sublease ran out? The cost went from $15 a square foot to $30 a square foot, plus, very high cost for parking. An idea that I've seen that I think is fabulous, and I give credit to TSU, is the Nashville Business Incubation Center. They have done a fabulous job taking small businesses, bringing them in, offering them attractive, affordable office space, but also providing resources that are mentoring and helping them run their business better, and it is working. For residential housing, I would look at a couple of things. Developers are now, or an idea that's being out there right now is when developers buy private land, inclusionary zoning is a potential solution to help us with affordable housing. There's another opportunity. Metro owns property. So when developers come in to buy our Metro property, I would suggest a fabulous idea to bring significant funds in would be to encourage them through that negotiation to make a significant investment in programs that are real important to us, like the Barnes Housing Trust Fund. These funds can be very important. And MDHA, of course, has the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. I think it's excellent. That's how I would work on affordable housing and commercial space.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you. Affordable housing is something that I know something about. Our company in 2010 was the National Property Management Company of the Year. We deal with apartments and multifamily commercial property. We know what it takes to interest developers to come in and build affordable housing. We know what affordable housing is. And let me tell you what affordable housing is not. If you build a 100-unit property today and are required to set aside 10% of those units or 5% of those units for affordable housing, and you build a 450 square foot efficiency apartment, and that rent is low enough to be called affordable housing, that's not solving the affordable housing problem. That's not a place where a family can live. It's not even putting a dent in the crisis we have in affordable housing. I've come up with a plan to add 10,000 affordable housing units, 2,500 units a year for 4 years. I will just tell you, I copied that plan from Salt Lake City, which had a 5,000 unit plan, and I studied how they did it and how they incentivized developers, how they provided assistance to do that. We're twice the size of Salt Lake, so I think 10,000 units over 4 years is something that Nashville can do. I know who the developers are around the country. industry that can come in and build affordable housing units. I know what incentives work. I know what type of financing options work, whether it's tax increment financing, the use of eminent domain to help these developers acquire sites. I know how to do that. I'll get these developers and people in our community building affordable housing, and we'll add 10,000 units of affordable housing during my administration.
To put the affordable housing issue in context, I think there's two things to think about. One is we have somewhere between 92,000 and 100,000 plus households that are cost burdened in Nashville, meaning they pay 30% or more of their housing related cost, 30% or more of their income in housing related cost, which is all across that income spectrum. The second thing, if you look at the fantastic work the Housing Fund has done over the last several years, really the last 19 years, they've lent over $66 million and leveraged over $400 million of private investment to create about 4,300 units, most of which are affordable. But when you put that in context, that's about 225 units a year. And while the Housing Fund is not exclusively responsible for affordable housing in the city, if you look at just what the Housing Fund has done and compare that to the environment that we're currently in, whether we need 2,000 units a year or 2,500 units a year or 1,500 units a year, we're now in an environment where we have to figure out how we do 7 or 10 or 12 years worth of work every year. The one thing we know is that housing and commercial development are provided in a market system. Rarely are market economics alone enough to provide affordable housing and affordable commercial development. I think you got to think about 4 constituencies, and I think we got to have multiple tools in the toolbox to get us anywhere near 2,000 or 2,500 units a year. First, we got to continue to encourage and promote what MDHA is looking at doing about how they leverage federal resources, how they also tap into a consortium of local banks on their Community Reinvestment Act dollars. 2, we got to look at how we incentivize nonprofit developers, and specifically through the Barnes Housing Trust. 20% of the housing trust funds in the country have more than $10 million a year on an annual basis. Clearly, we have to increase our commitment to the Barnes Housing Trust. We have to look at what we do to incentivize for-profit developers with TIF incentives and otherwise, and also look at how we take care of tenants and homeowners, whether that's specific things we can do to give them a first right of refusal or otherwise.
Ms. Berry.
If there's one word that has captured, I think, this campaign and these forums, it's affordability. And it's not just about affordable housing. It's about affordability and being able to live in Nashville. But let's talk about housing for a second. I saw James Frazier here earlier. James has done a lot of research on this, and his ideas are great. You have to fund it, you have to build it, you have to retain it, and you have to preserve it. And we have all of those 4 pieces that we are working on. Funding it through the Barnes Fund. I was proud to be the co-sponsor of the Barnes Fund. In fact, we're on second reading next week at Council to put some more money into the Barnes Fund. It's a start, and absolutely it needs more. We're using the short-term rental income that we're going to capture from the new short-term rental legislation, and we're going to have some more money to spend. But we need more. And so when you talk about funding it and building it, the building it component, if we're going to build 3,000 to 6,000 units, which is what we're projected to need, we're not going to build our way out of this. So we have to be better about retaining it. And that means that when we go and you see folks go into neighborhoods and developers go into neighborhoods and they take 3 or 6 units down and they replace it with multiple units that are not affordable, you've lost that housing. And in order for us to make sure that we are retaining that housing, we have to incent developers. The good news is last night, John Ray Clemens at the State House actually passed a House bill that now will give local governments the ability to spend more money in local localities for incentives for developers. So we are working with the state to make this happen. But we are also talking about the commercial aspects of this, because if I can live here, I also want to work here. Other cities do this well. If we look at innovation zones, you have the ability to bring together government, universities, research universities, and businesses and industry to create these zones where you have lots of folks doing many things, living, working, and also innovating. And you also have these places like Granville Island. Last year, Vancouver, we went, yeah, I didn't see you this time, darn it. Talk to me later.
Mr. Gentry.
Yes. The affordable housing discussion has been going on a long time, and we've been in that discussion. And the fact is that the Barnes Fund, Housing Fund, came through the Poverty Initiative that went into Metro Social Services almost a decade ago. And affordable housing was one of the topics and one of the areas that that commission was working on. And unfortunately, it stopped. And again, we talk about the plan, and a plan being taken through to its completion. And so we don't have an agency within government anymore to really lead the affordable housing initiative. And as mayor, that's what I'll do. I will recreate that program in our Office of Social Equity so that these types of issues will be dealt with on a regular basis. We've got a room right here full of developers, bankers, persons who have the ability to make this happen. And the only way we're going to be able to create true affordable housing as the market does drive what we do is to help developers to be able to afford to build affordable housing. And so we're going to have to utilize different entities to supplement and subsidize so that you can do it. And we're going to have to do it over a regular basis. And I believe that we're going to have a public-private initiative to really make that happen. And as we bring new corporations into town, they're going to have to participate in this. And so it's going to take a collective effort. Government can't do it by itself, but together we can do it, and we can provide affordable housing for all. Thank you.
A couple weeks ago, I had breakfast at Nashville with a new friend of mine from Los Angeles. I'm 53. He's 5 or 6 years older than I am. He talked about how idyllic it was growing up in Los Angeles back in the 60s. And then he said, you know, the first hint that we were in trouble was we had a very sudden affordable housing crisis. And instead of coming together, it led to a very fractious debate. And so I think this affordable housing conversation is important not just for the obvious humane reasons of making sure that everyone can afford to live here, but for what it says about our city and where we are in our growth cycle. So I think that's something we need to focus on. I don't think we're on autopilot right now as far as our city goes. I mean, there's some specific tools we can use to improve the supply of affordable housing. I'm more of a carrot person rather than a stick person. I don't want to have mandatory requirements on developers to do something. I am in favor of providing zoning incentives, as happens in many other states, to, in return for more density, provide some below market priced housing. As has been mentioned, the Barnes Fund is a great device. We just need to fund it. But frankly, I think it's a little bit simplistic to look at affordable housing as simply a supply problem. You know, I think it's also a demand problem. In other words, do we have people with the financial wherewithal to pay for housing? And which gets me to the point where 5 months into this mayoral debate scenario, we've had about 2 minutes of conversation on public education. Yet we've knocked on 12,000 doors in my campaign, and we've had thousands of conversations. The number one issue in Nashville is the quality of public education. Public education is what drives our economy. If we want to have a great economy, if we want to make sure people have the wherewithal to afford housing, we're going to invest and accelerate the gains in our public education. So let's address both the supply parts as we can do, but let's be mindful that if we improve the quality of our public education, that will negate much of the problem.
Thank you. Our next question revolves around transportation, and if you have your seat belts, you might want to put them on. This question was so important that it was independently issued by 4 of our council action committees. Sometimes being a leader means that you make the decisions that aren't going to make everyone happy, but they're the best thing for the greater good of the community. And over the past few years here in Nashville, there has been significant debate on mass transit options and regional transit systems, but there's been no resolution yet. If not the AMP, then what, if any, are the local and regional mass transit and other multimodal transportation solutions that your administration might consider? What do you see as barriers to implementing local and regional solutions to Middle Tennessee transportation, and how would you overcome those obstacles? Ms. Rebrovick, would you lead our round?
Yes, we are making progress, and we cannot take our foot off the pedal to make this happen. It's that important, as you said, Tabitha. My experience at Consensus Point, the company that I've been the CEO of for the past 5.5 years, has taught me one important way to remove an obstacle, and that is you got to listen to the people. You got to have them involved, and they need to help you design the solution in terms of what they need, who's going to ride the transit, and where do they need to ride it. And I think we are on our way now with the feedback from Nashville Next. We need to validate that feedback and get everyone involved, and that's happening right now with the MTA, RTA team that's going out into the community. So I hope everyone participates. When we get that feedback back, that's when we can look at options, that's when we can look at the cost, and that's when we can go find the funding. That's the methodology that we want to use. It's this sort of experience that I will bring to bear to help Nashville get a regional rapid multimodal transit system. This is not just a Davidson County. It truly is a regional issue. We all know that over half of the Tennesseans that live in our 14-county area leave where they live to go to work every day. Over 50%. That's just not sustainable, and we will fix it. So there's three approaches. Short term, I talked about smarter technology, smarter grids. That's a short-term solution, things we can do right now. Number two, midterm is rapid transit. And I would also echo Bill's comments on the rapid bus lanes. I also looked into this Houston solution, the reimagined plan. And they are on their way to having routes with buses that are rapid, reliable. You got a green line, a yellow line, a blue line. Spoke to Steve Bland about that. He said Houston's a little different because of their topography, but we can learn a lot from what they're doing. They're going to project a 20% increase in using buses because people have access real time to information.
Tom.
Thank you. Long term, it's a regional mayor's caucus solution, and I will work very carefully with them. Thank you.
Mr. Freeman.
Thank you. You know, if you poll this group, the great majority of this group spent a lot of time and energy advocating for the AMP. The community decided the AMP was not the solution that we needed, and what I've said is that it was a solution searching for a problem to solve. If I ask each of you, where are our traffic problems in Middle Tennessee, none of you would have said out West End Avenue, up Broadway and out West End Avenue. But many of you might have said between Clarksville and Nashville, Lebanon and Nashville, Franklin, all these bedroom communities, it's clear to me that what we need is a regional mass transit solution. It's not going to cost $172 million. It's going to cost billions of dollars. It's going to take 8 to 10 years to plan it and implement it. As I said earlier, we're 10 years behind in getting to it. So we've got to get on that problem day one. We wasted a lot of time and energy, 3.5 years and several $1 million talking about the AMP. We divided the community into pro-mass transit, anti-mass transit factions. It was just a colossal waste of time. And we've got to have a bigger view of the problem. And the problem is a regional mass transit problem, and it needs a regional mass transit solution. We need help from all of the surrounding communities. We need help from the governor. We need help from our 2 U.S. senators. We need help from the White House to the courthouse in getting this problem solved. I'll start on that immediately, and I won't waste time on an AMP-type project.
I appreciate the work that many people in this room did to plan and to advocate the AMP project, and thought that it was important to getting that on the table as an issue to be discussed, and an issue that certainly all of us have to grapple with, and all of us have to say that we will do something about. One of the frustrations that I had with the AMP project was that I didn't realize until the end of that project, or to the end of the conversation, that the 7.1 miles that was intended to go from 5 Points to White Bridge Road was just intended to be the backbone of a larger system. I thought one of the failures was our inability to articulate what phase 2, what phase 3, phase 4 looks looks like. We trapped it in 4 council districts, so it was hard for somebody in Antioch or Madison to imagine where and when the AMP reaches them or how they benefit from that. We need, as I've said, an 18-month plan as well as an 18-year plan. I think there are 3 things we have to focus on. First, I think we have to be bold and create a long-term vision. We have to show folks what this looks like 20 years out, because that's going to be the trade-off for some of the sacrifices and the inconveniences to getting it started. 2, I think this has to be a regional system. When 54% of our workforce lives in another county in which they work, even if we could solve just Davidson County, we will not have solved much. And I think that regional component has to include light rail. But third, we need a concrete first step of something that we can get going and something that we can build off of, and that the next mayor can be shovels in the ground in 9 to 12 months from taking office. And to me, that looks like a corridor by corridor approach, whether it's looking at high growth and high economic development areas like what's happening out Charlotte, or high congestion areas like Nolensville Road. If you look at the 16 or 17 busiest intersections in the city, 4 of those cross with Nolensville Road. So I think we have to have a longer, broader vision. I think we have to have a regional aspect that includes light rail that's being advocated now by the state in many respects, and I think we have to have a short, concrete step where we can get going. Okay. Just under, right?
Just under.
You brought it in. Do I get your
got 159.
Yeah. I'll defer my 1 second to Megan.
Thank you so much. Let me get started. When we talk about transit and the AMP, and I think that was part of the question, I'm actually on the record for having supported the AMP. I was on the Metro Council. We allocated the funds because we actually did believe that we needed to get started on transit. And whether or not you were for or against the AMP, the whole piece on West End was where the conversation broke down, but actually when it took a left on 5th, for me, was where the problem was, because it didn't run all the way down Broadway and it didn't connect to the Music City Star or some new line coming in from Ashland City. So in my administration, the first thing that I will do is to actually create an Office of Transit that will come from the mayor's office, and that's where that vision will reside. And it will be all of the modalities, so that when we are talking about bikes and we're talking about sidewalks and we're talking about greenways, we're talking about everything as it relates to transit. Any kind of a conveyance that gets you out of your car to someplace else. And there are opportunities for us, obviously short and long term. Short term, many of you have heard me say, my husband's a bus rider. He will tell you that there is something worse than a late bus. It's an early bus. You don't even know it came, because we don't have the technology to know that the bus already came. So there are technological fixes that help riders immediately. But the long-term fix is that everything is on the table, and that means light rail, and that means sitting down with CSX and getting them to the table, because our ability to actually fund light rail and any other infrastructure is going to have to be combined with federal, state, and local dollars. So whether or not, again, you were for or against the AMP, the saddest part about that AMP is now we're back out of the queue for any kind of federal dollars. And if you look, I actually took a look at the grants yesterday to just see what's out there. So $100 million got granted the other day for buses and bus facilities from the feds, and they went to California, Colorado, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Minneapolis, and Minnesota. And then there was another one, $54 million, that went to Texas, Ohio, Minnesota, Kentucky. So a lot of federal dollars are flowing to other places, but they're not flowing here. In my administration, I'll make sure we're getting our share of federal grants.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure by now you've been able to determine that we have a right now problem and we need to deal with it. And of course, we have a regional problem and we have a future vision, and that is the need for some type of transportation initiative for the future. And so we are clear with that. But one thing that was mentioned was one of the candidates said, hard to imagine, in his statement. And the fact is, some of these things are hard to imagine. And years ago, we got on a train in Louisville, and we all rode back on the train in Louisville. And after that train ride, we were able to imagine the Music City Star, and here it is. And many of you have traveled with me to many cities: Boston, Toronto, Denver, Boston, Indianapolis, Seattle, New York, Atlanta, Salt Lake City, Miami, and even Detroit. And we have seen transportation systems everywhere we go. Some failed, some didn't. But the fact is, what we saw in the cities like Denver, where it works, is they had a plan. And they had a plan that was a comprehensive plan. The difference between where we are and where they are is they implemented that plan and they moved forward. So we can sit here today and let you know what the problems are, and we can sit here today and let you know what we feel the best modes of transportation will be to solve the problem. But I'm here to tell you again, and I'm going to be as consistent as I can be, is we're going to develop that plan, and then we're going to implement that plan, and we're going to move forward with that plan. Thank you.
To discuss mass transit and our transportation challenges, I think it's first important to sort of frame the question, how did we arrive at where we are? And I would argue that kind of the World War II culture of planning is sort of how we got here. It was a culture that encouraged separation of everything we do, where we live, where we work, where we shop. And so it has completely maximized our need to get in the car and go everywhere. And to make a mass transit system work with that type of lifestyle is a real challenge. So before we even talk about transportation, I think we need to talk about development and continuing to encourage kind of nodes of development so we can have a sustainable transportation program where you live, work, and shop all in close areas where you can encourage us both the use of mass transit and encourages walkability, which is a good thing for our health. Yeah, there's specific things we can do. My preference on the commuter part, which is a very critical part of fixing our transportation program, is to harness the private sector. Let's find if it's a viable solution. And we have a lot of debt on our books right now. I think it's plenty of debt on our municipal books. If we can harness the private sector as they do in public-private partnerships to have them build and own a commuter transportation program, whether it's light rail or dedicated bus, that could be terrific. They could build it, we would own it, and we could defray the cost with user fees. So that's how I would sort of go about that as a first swipe at the regional part. Within Nashville, let's set up an inclusive, transparent plan, a process of working through this. When I was on the school board, I learned there's a difference between managing in the private sector and running a government agency. You really have to have a big vision and invite everybody in to participate. And I'm confident if we do that, we can find out a plan, determine a plan where there's buy-in. It won't lead to fractiousness. It'll lead to our community coming together, and it'll be a system we can afford that connects our city, connects these developed nodes of sustainable living that will make it work.
When you run for mayor, you're supposed to have all the answers and never have any lack of confidence for it. But I think I saw Burt Matthews walk in earlier. We had a meeting about 2 weeks ago, and a light bulb went off in my head. We've had, I think, now 15 debates. And we talked about transit, and I have my 3-point plan in short, medium, long term. And Burt said to me, transit's no different than education. And I'd spent 10 years building a group of charter schools, getting kids into college, and the light bulb went out. There is no silver bullet to improve our schools. It's a combination of many things. It's about bringing what works to scale. And as we think about transit, it's about getting the basics right. And it's about leadership. And I've said it in every debate and say it here again this morning. The first thing I would do in first day in office as mayor is hold a cabinet meeting and bring together the head of MTA and head of MDHA and the new superintendent of schools, none of whom work for me as the mayor, and say that we are focused on transit, we're focused on education, we're focused on housing, and we need an integrated approach. We spend $80 million a year on MTA buses. We spend $40 million a year on yellow school buses. One of those is countywide. When we think about long-term funding and making a truly integrated approach, we need to find a way to leverage those funds, those resources, and those plans. The STRIDE program, grades 9 through 12 right now are riding for free. We see ridership doubling almost every month. That's one piece of it. Second piece of it is we need to think differently about regionalism. Bill talks about the highways. That's an important part where it will involve the state, it will involve the feds, but it will require a regional approach even within Davidson County. I talked earlier about those transfer points all throughout the county, whether it's Hickory Hollow Mall, Bellevue Mall, Rivergate Mall, or the airport. But it's also about making those connections with other counties. The fire department is starting conversations with Williamson County about how to respond faster to fire calls. We can build on that regional approach and the mayor's caucus to start moving in that regional direction in the future.
time.
Oh, I got it in.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Infrastructure is our next topic, and the Young Leader Committee submitted this question. A city's infrastructure, both literally and figuratively, is the foundation upon which it is built. Like cities around the country, many of Nashville's infrastructure systems are old and insufficient. They can't meet current demands, much less future demands. Now, there is special legislation overseas in Canada and in other cities throughout the U.S. for things like public-private partnership. But given that hasn't come to Tennessee yet, or Nashville, we ask, where would infrastructure come into your policy priorities? What would you do to address the state of infrastructure in Nashville and Davidson County? And where would you get the money, if needed, to do so? And Mr. Freeman, I'll ask you to lead our answer round.
Thank you. You know, one of the things that concerns me most about our wonderful city, and we have so many great things to be proud of in Nashville, but one of the stats that I've studied over the last year or so is the job growth in the surrounding counties. Williamson County was the #1 county in America for job growth the fourth quarter of last year. Rutherford County was the #2 fastest job growth county in America the fourth quarter of last year. Nashville wasn't even in the top 10. We are losing companies, corporate headquarters. There was an article recently in I think it was in the Business Journal, that talked about the 25 most recent corporate relocations into our area. 13 of those went to Williamson County, and the rest of them were split around amongst the other counties. We're not getting our fair share of this great fortune. It's more regional explosive growth than it is Nashville. We've graphed and charted the population growth, the corporate relocations over the last, from 1990 through the current date. And that data shows that from 1990 through about 5 years ago, we had a pretty steep graph in terms of job growth, corporate relocations, and exciting good economic news. In the last 3 or 4 years, that graph has flattened out. It's not flatlined, but it's very close. And I'll be happy to share that information with any of you that would like to see it. But we've got to do a better job being advocates for Davidson County in terms of this regional growth, and all of these issues hinge on having continued growth and having a jealous advocate for Davidson County. That's what I'll do.
With respect to the infrastructure part of the question, I think of infrastructure and education as priorities 1A and 1B. I believe that a renewed emphasis on infrastructure will be the Music City Center project of the next 4 or 8 years. The reality is, as much as some of us, myself included, want to see us keep our foot on the gas as a city and keep the momentum going, we have to understand that that's going to look different over the next 4 or 8 years. We're not going to do another $1 billion worth of capital investment in downtown Nashville, probably in my lifetime. But that doesn't mean that we don't have the continued opportunity to invest in ourselves and to invest all over the city and all over the county. Whether that's 20th century infrastructure like our 5,800 miles of roads or 3,000 miles of water lines and sewer pipes, many of which are 40 years old or older, or whether that's 21st century infrastructure like high-speed internet or mass transit. I think that has to be the focus going forward. And that's not a criticism of the current administration, but it's an opportunity as we turn that page. In 2012, we accommodated 11.8 million visitors to the city that spent $4.6 billion. In 2013, 11.8 million visitors had gone to 12.5 million visitors. 4.6 billion in spending had gone to 5 billion in spending. We know 2014 was way up over 2013, and if you were downtown weekend before last for the SEC tournament, we know 2015 is way up over 2014. You're going to see over the next 4 or 5 or 6 years, not 12.5 million visitors, but 15, 16, 17 million visitors that aren't spending $5 billion, but are spending $8 or $8.5 billion. The sales tax growth on that is significant. It doesn't just go to the state. It doesn't just go back to pay convention center or sports authority bonds. At a minimum, 2.25% of that goes back to the general fund. And I think we ought to show people where and how we're reinvesting that, and show where we're investing that in infrastructure, whether that's a mile's worth of sidewalks on Lebanon Road or a community center in Madison, or infrastructure infrastructure needs throughout the county.
Ms. Berry?
Thank you. So the question is priority. Will it be a priority? And the answer is yes. Cities aren't functioning if they don't have roads, water, sewer, and where are you going to get the money? Well, this question is actually a fairly big question as far as it relates to infrastructure, because we're talking about lots of different kinds of infrastructure. So we don't get the money in the same places. Transportation funding comes from one source. We just talked about the fact that a lot of that is federal dollars and gas tax. Water and sewer comes from a different source. It comes from revenue bonds. And when we look at the investments that we've made over the last 7.5 years in our infrastructure, we have made investments. So I pulled this the other day. We have $362 million we've invested in public works. We've invested $137 million in MTA. We've invested $485 million in our schools, $183 million in parks, $27 million in our libraries, and that money comes from somewhere else. That money comes from general obligation bonds. And recently, our rating agencies just reapproved our ratings, and they say they are comfortable with our debt load. So that gives us the opportunity to issue more bonds so that we can have infrastructure upgrades. Because ultimately, the infrastructure is the kind of stuff that you have to do when you think about your house. You have to put a new roof on, because deferred maintenance doesn't help. And if we have 100-year-old water and sewer lines that are going to break, that's going to cost us a lot more in the long run. So the emphasis is to make sure, I'm looking at you, the emphasis is to make sure that we continue to invest in our infrastructure. Yes.
Mr. Gentry.
Well, it's a huge question that takes a huge process. I know during the Purcell administration, a lot was done, but a lot was done around sidewalks and a lot was done underneath the ground, stormwater. Millions and millions of dollars were spent. Well, guess what? We still have a problem underneath the ground. And we have bricks falling into our stormwater system. And we have a city that is growing on top of a shaky infrastructure. So where we can talk about technology and other infrastructure needs, I'm going to talk just strictly about underneath the ground, stormwater. It's going to be a huge undertaking. It's going to be an undertaking that's going to cost millions of dollars, and it's going to have to be done right now. And it's going to have to be paid for. And again, we don't have any real sources to pay other than our municipal bonds or revenue bonds. And that sounds like an easy place to go. But the problem is, we've got debt service that hadn't been paid. It's money that's owed. So we're going to have to find a way to reduce spending within government. We're going to have to find a way to handle our debt service so that we can fund the needs that we have right now just for what's going on underneath the ground, water and sewage. So these are realities that we've got to do. The money from these great projects that are taking place right now is not going to come to us in great droves right now. It's going to take a while. So we're going to have to be mean and lean. We're going to have to utilize the funding sources that we have, and we're going to have to go at it again. This is not such a plan. This is action. And we're going to have to go at it immediately, or we're not going to be able to accommodate our growth and all the great things that are going on in Nashville right now. As mayor, I will get to it immediately. Thank you.
Yes, I've had the good fortune of having about a half-century perspective on our city. Nashville is just a phenomenally better place than it was when I was growing up. By any measure, growth has been very good for Nashville. When I was coming out of college in 1983, the hot place was Atlanta. That's where everybody wanted to move. That's where the opportunity was. Yet now, when you talk to most people, people studiously avoid Atlanta because the quality of life has diminished so badly. I mentioned earlier having breakfast a few weeks ago with a friend from Los Angeles who said, well, no, back in the 1960s, 15, 20 years before that, Los Angeles was the it city. People were moving there. There was huge opportunity, diverse culture. Everything was great and prosperous. But they made some mistakes. They didn't understand where they were in the life cycle of the city, and the quality of life has diminished, and the quality of life has declined. I don't have a PowerPoint here, but I kind of sketched out something to kind of show where we are right here. This is the growth of a city. This is the life cycle of a city. And if you make good decisions, you keep on moving up with good quality of life. But Atlanta, about 20 years ago, reached this point. 10 years before that, Los Angeles got it. You can see how the growth kept on going and the quality of life started diminishing. Well, this is where we are, folks. We're right here. We're not on autopilot. We've had great trends, and I know we can take care of this. I'm running for mayor as a fifth-generation Nashvilleian because I think we're at a fight for it now or lose it forever moment. And I want to make sure we beat the odds. And beating the odds means taking care of infrastructure. These are the front and center issues that we can address as long as we understand their real priorities. Transit is front and center. We've talked about that a lot. Sewers, we've had occasion to talk about that over the last 4 or 5 months. These are all issues we just need to prioritize. How do you pay for it? Well, there are no gimmicks. At least I'm not in favor of selling weird kind of bonds that kick it 30, 40 years down the road. We have to pay for this stuff. So as mayor, you ask about what's the priority. Well, I'd say infrastructure is up there if we want to maintain a good quality of life here.
Okay, Mr. Kane.
This is a big question. This is a big election, but I think there's one major issue that everything else is tied to. We have put a lot on the company credit card as a city, and how we pay it off is the important, the critical issue. And as we think about that, infrastructure has the greatest bang for its buck. Literally, when we invest $1, we can get $2 or $3 in return. I think back 30 years ago when my family moved here, when Mayor Fulton was the mayor. When we think of 30 years of growth, really he started this trend. He invested in our first convention center downtown, but also led the effort to save the Ryman. He put in $416 million in 1986 into sewers, which really allowed our county to grow, but also put bricks on Church Street as well as Germantown that created that unique character in each of those neighborhoods. And as I think forward, we have a 3-year-old daughter. 30 years from now, what do I want her and the other kids and our future kids to look back and say, thank God we made those investments today? So that's where infrastructure becomes so important. But we need to broaden that definition where it's not just about sewers or sidewalks or schools, but about a truly integrated approach. So let me talk about how we can pay for these. One, good poets borrow and great poets steal. We've heard about Houston a couple of times around transit. We've looked at Houston where they've actually taken their government-owned property and used social impact bonds, partnered with the Clinton Global Initiative to upgrade all of their public space, pay for it by the energy savings. We have 16 million square feet here in Davidson County. 13 million square feet of that are in our schools. I ran a school where literally a side of the building was being held up by a cracked pipe. When we think about the investments we can get in return, $1.2 billion in capital costs around our schools. Those are dollars that can have a major impact, but not if we just continue to think of schools as schools, but start transitioning to community centers or park space and really pull those pieces together.
Thank you.
I get in? Yeah, so you come.
I'm running for mayor for many reasons, and one of those is to bring my life's experiences to solve some of these problems like infrastructure. These problems are just like the projects that I've had the chance to do working for IBM, KPMG, and Dell for the past 32 years. Implementing multi-year complex solutions for companies like FedEx, HCA, to name a few. And I have to go back to Tabitha's point on public-private partnerships, because one of the most important things we've got to do is get creative about funding. And I see Joey Hatch at Skanska here. That is one example of a company building a brand new airport for New York, and they are doing something that that city would have never been able to afford to do without those kinds of solutions. So I will advocate for those to make sure we evaluate them and we look for opportunities to find sources of income. In addition, technology. I go back to Smarter Nashville. We can see an ROI by implementing technology all across the city of 20, 30% in just a couple of years to help us fund other projects that we need to do. I'm going to throw a few of those ideas out at you. Our new buildings can have cool roofs and reflective paint that bounces the sun away and keeps the energy inside the buildings. Our city parks can have self-watering technology that immediately starts the watering systems when the moisture is dry. Philadelphia has a talking trash can model, literally, where the recycle bins and the trash cans alert the trash collectors when it's time to empty them. What this means is more efficient route accounting. As funny as it sounds, this is the way you save money, because we spend a lot of time sending people out on routes. And there's even technology for new paving surfaces. So the rainwater seeps down through the ground instead of going off the drainage system. We're doing some of this in Nashville. Mark Deutschman and I have talked about some of the things that we're doing. These are solutions that will help us fund our infrastructure.
Thank you. So this is our final pre-prepared question. We'll have time for 3 questions from the audience afterwards. Nashville Sustainability and Health from the Building Healthy Places Council. We have one of the most unhealthy populations in the country. The impact on associated health care costs, viability of our workforce, and the livability of our city, to name only a few consequences, are significant. Do you think there's a role for government in building a healthier community? And if so, what are some of the actions or steps you will take to help ensure Nashville builds for a healthier community going forward? Mr. Bone, please lead our round.
I feel like I'm behind on my name dropping, but this is probably not the question to drop names. Yes, I do believe there is a role for government. The irony is we're the healthcare capital of the world. We have a healthcare economy that contributes $30 billion locally and $70 billion globally, but present company excluded, that has not resulted in a very healthy city. If you look at us compared to peer cities on just in terms of overall health, we rank 4th out of 5 when you compare us to Austin, Charlotte, Cincinnati, and Raleigh-Durham. And in fact, we rank dead last when it comes to childhood obesity, to premature deaths, to injuries, and to a whole host of other healthy criteria that we look at. But more importantly than it just being the right thing to do, it also comes at a tremendous cost. There's an economic development argument that says our local economy is losing about $10 billion a year because we are unhealthy, whether that's in lost jobs, rising unemployment, or rising healthcare costs. I think that what we have to do is 2 things. One is, and I give a lot of credit to the current administration and the current council over the last 8 years, they have continued to provide increased access to healthy amenities. We look at our greenway system, it's unbelievable. 80% of us live within 1 mile of the greenway. Our greenways, certainly there are ways to continue to improve upon that and other healthy initiatives. But I think the other opportunity, and had the chance to visit with Senator Bill Frist, who's been working with the Clinton Global Initiative on some of this, what he advocates for and what I agree with is to create a citywide collaborative focused on health and to leverage the resources and the relationships that are already here and the dollars that are already here for that. So I think we got to continue to provide access to those healthy amenities, but also make this a renewed effort, a renewed focus, and a renewed priority like Senator Frist has advocated for.
Ms. Berry?
So public health is absolutely the work of local government, whether it's making sure that we are vaccinating children, we're maintaining a public hospital, health care for the indigent, and we are at a public health crisis here. And we have invested in quality of life because it is the role of government to also create the conditions for quality of life, like parks, greenways, initiatives to walk 100 miles, fun runs, access to information, and improving the local food supply. Those are all roles of government. And as mentioned, on council in the last several years, we have actually increased a lot of our open space in Davidson County. We have 13,000 acres of open space. We just added another 448 acres with the Warner Park system recently, and we have about 200 miles of greenways all throughout Davidson County. But we're way behind our other peer cities on how much land that we're using for park space. We have about 3%. Our peer cities have about 16%. But this is a complex problem, so let me just talk about one specific issue as it relates to food deserts. Food deserts and improving access to food is at least one way that you can create a healthier population. We have to improve access to grocery stores, and there are ways to do that where you can incent financing to build grocery stores in neighborhoods where you don't have currently the ability to get food to folks who need healthy food. And we've also supported urban agriculture. While I've been on council, whether you were pro or anti-chicken, you can have a chicken now. And but ultimately, as I mentioned at the beginning, I do think it is the role of government to be part of that public health conversation, but here's my libertarian coming out in me. It is the role of government to create the quality of life, but it is not the role of government to nanny state people into living that quality of life.
Thank you. Mr. Gentry?
Thank you. We are the healthcare capital of the world, and we are turning into a green city. We're a sustainable city. We've done those things. We have the walking trails, we've got the bike trails, and we've got a lot of open space, and that's great. But we're also a city, and I'm going to take the rest of my time to talk to you about a city of lost people, a city of poor people, a city of homeless people. That is the unhealthy city. 18% of our population are in poverty. Over 3,000 kids in our school system are homeless. So just do the math, put them with a parent, and you can determine daily how many homeless people are on our street. That is an unhealthy city. And can you imagine the health care cost of those people, what it costs us to ensure that they are as healthy as they can be? It's millions of dollars. We've got to do better at that level. We've got to do better in this population. And if we can improve the health of that population, of poor people, of homeless people, if we can improve the health of a group of people who cannot, in many ways, take care of themselves, we can create a healthier city from the ground up. We also can create a population of human capital that can provide resources and revenue to our city rather than draining a lot of our resources because of their inability to do for themselves. So Nashville will be a healthier city and a stronger city when we put more emphasis on the needs of our people. And as mayor, I would do that.
Thank you.
When I try to think about the legacy of our present mayor, Carl Dean, I'll think about the buildings, the Music City Center and the sports and the sound stadium that's under construction. I think these are very exciting and going to transform our city, and I'm very excited about them. But ultimately, what I think about is long-term legacy. It's the policies he's done, the way he's intervened to help people. He got involved very early in his term, intervened to help special education children who were having some difficulties within our school system. That made a huge difference in young people, some of our most fragile citizens in Nashville. Later, as you know, he got involved in domestic violence, organized, brought all the organizations together. The baton kept on falling, and so women kept on being abused. And he intervened and made a difference directly in the lives of thousands of women. And in health, he's made that a front and center issue. He hasn't done it in a kind of an inappropriate way. He's not, trying to ban, sodas that are too large, that sort of stuff, which I think is a little crazy, a little excessive. But he's understood that we need to make sure that Nashville develops in a way where we can live healthy lifestyles. And we think about Chattanooga. I think Chattanooga is still 10 or 20 years ahead of us in kind of harnessing our natural environment in a way where we can live healthier lives. We've made a lot of progress on our greenways, our bike paths, but boy, we have so much more to do in creating more open space. So I think this is how the mayor's office kind of appropriately gets involved in our health by expanding these things. And then finally, let's put metrics on it. If you don't measure things, I'm not sure how important they are. So let's put metrics on our diabetes rate, our obesity rate, our use of seat belts, our smoking rate. We have the data. I just happened to run into a few folks the other day who were telling me about the accessibility of this. So let's put metrics on our public health. Let's have a target so 10 years we can see if we achieve these.
Let me talk personally. I've worked for the last 10 years in communities that are struggling to have access to good food, to transit, to healthcare. And one of the most heartbreaking things that always used to happen was when parents who lived about a block and a half, 2 blocks away from Metro General or Matthew Walker or different hospitals around the city would call and ask where they could get dental care, where they could get health care. And so the outreach component of this is a critical piece of it. So yes, does the government have a role? Absolutely. Through my Office of Nonprofits, Neighborhoods, and Faith, that will be one of its main tasks, is to work with our healthcare community, to work with our healthcare providers, because we have existing resources, but making those connections are critical. When I talked with Vanderbilt Hospital, when I talked with Metro General, we have never had a healthcare master plan for the city. We have an economic development plan, we have a tourism plan. We need a healthcare plan to understand where those resources are and where those gaps are. And as mayor, that will be one of the first things I do, is call together our healthcare providers and have them talk about what that plan looks like. Second piece is Metro General and Meharry. Very close to my heart, we started 3 schools in that neighborhood. Right now, I always tell the story, when I visited Metro General, I asked them, what is the one thing that you would need that the current mayor, council haven't given you and the future mayor can give you? I expected $5 million because the subsidy had been caught. They said $250,000. I was sort of stunned, but I asked what for. They said to put back the pharmacy that has been taken away that we had to cut. That pharmacy allowed people to visit all of their doctors in one visit, then go downstairs, get all their medicine, and then go back home. Now that the pharmacy is not there, they have to go to the public health department, go to Publix, go to Kroger, which takes away time, adds cost, and their return visits have been cut in half. That's a direct connection with health that as mayor, that would be where I'd spend the money to make those investments.
Thank you. Ms. Rebrovick.
Thank you. Yes, we do have to build a culture of health, and I'm excited to hear everyone talking about this and for this question to come up. You know, Robert Wood Johnson has a foundation, and they are publicly investing in cities that take this on and come up with good solutions. And one example they've used is Brownsville, Texas. Again, Texas is coming up a lot today. But they built a community action board. And again, it involved all the healthcare companies, it involved education, it involved businesses in the community, because you solve this across all of those areas. If we want to create real sustainable change, we've got to integrate health into everything that everyone does. And so it's what you eat in a restaurant. It's what we serve in the schools. It's the 30,000 children in Nashville's public schools that ride in cars to schools, but they're within walking distance, but there are no sidewalks, and it's not safe. So their parents are never going to let them walk to school, but they need to. And so Brownsville is seeing significant success by bringing the community together to work on solving this problem. I want to applaud ULI and your Healthy Corridor program. I'm very excited about the grant that you got to study Charlotte Pike between 40 and I-440 to focus on healthier communities, to focus on healthier citizens, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results of that study because it's going to have significant impact across all of the city. I also want to bring up that this is also an issue that private companies can help solve along with government. I've called out the One City complex and solution that's been put together. If you haven't looked at that, I highly recommend you do. It's actually going to be on that Charlotte Pike corridor, but they are going to create a mindful living space. So in addition to commercial and residential property, they have a greenway, they have an amphitheater, they have sand volleyball, they have CrossFit, healthy restaurants. Those are the kind of comprehensive solutions that we can implement. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Freeman.
Thank you. You know, I think I've got a shot at solving the affordable housing problem in Nashville. I think I've got some unique ideas on the mass transit solutions. I've got to tell you, I don't know that I've got any unique ideas about how to solve obesity in Nashville. But what we've got to do, I happen to think Carl Dean has done a great job at this. Every walk, run, every fitness event that takes place in Nashville, Mayor Dean is there. He's participating. He's encouraging school children and others to participate in those programs. I think he's done all that a mayor can do to solve that problem. I think what we've got to do is look at a three-prong approach. It has to do with nutrition, diet, and exercise. And that's exactly what Mayor Dean has encouraged everywhere that I've seen him. I don't know how many of you have walked with him on any of these walks, but he's in pretty darn good shape and encourages the rest of the community to do that. So I will do my best to solve that problem. I'm not sure that any of us up here are going to have a magic bullet to solve that problem, but I'm confident we'll all work on it. Thank you.
Thank you. And so with that, it concludes our predetermined list of questions. We're going to move into the rapid round now. So if you thought 2 minutes was tough to have a response, we're looking for quick sound bites. At this point, we'll have only 1 minute remaining. Trent Strobel will hold up the sign when you have expired down to 30 seconds. And Brett will call time at that 1 minute. So please be respectful of the other candidate. These are members representing each of us, and they'll be asking our questions.
Hi, Kim Hawkins, Hawkins Partners, Landscape Architects. My question, how would you optimize the organizational structure of our metro departments? Codes, planning, public works, to make that system work more efficiently so that we can optimize outcomes for policy and enforcement?
Ms. Barry, would you start, please?
Sure. So I only have a minute, so I'm going to have to talk really fast. I've talked about this specifically as it relates to transit. And in my administration, transit will reside in the mayor's office, and that includes all of those components of those different departments, because each one of them has a piece of the transit pie. And at the moment, because of the way that they interact, and they have different responsibilities, you have an opportunity to make it much more crystal clear on what the vision is. If you have Public Works is really good at implementing. I'm not sure Public Works is the vision for transit in this town, and I'm going to use the complete streets as an example. We recently put in a complete street at Korean Veteran Boulevard, and one of the components was that traffic wasn't flowing fast enough. Public Works came back, took half of it out. Sometimes traffic flow faster is not necessarily the solution. So in my administration, transit from that perspective will be in the mayor's office.
Mr. Gentry?
Yes, a few years ago, we created this campus to hopefully create a sort of a one-stop shop so that it would be an easy process and everybody would be close together. It appears that maybe it's not working as well as it could have worked, so for me, I would want to hear from you as to what the problems are so that we can improve what has already been put together. And so not to assume that I already know what your problems are as it relates to not being able to move through this system in a smooth and efficient and effective fashion. I would rather hear from you what those problems are before I would speak to a problem that I'm not aware of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox.
Yeah, part of the challenge of making sure we grow into a better city, just not a bigger city that's slightly less comfortable with a lower quality of life, is to understand that our municipal government is one that befits a nice small town. We haven't really changed it in a long time. We have an extraordinarily horizontal structure here. So as I speak to department heads and people who live and work in the departments, it's really extraordinary. You have 52 departments, very few people sitting on top of them, so that the lack of communication among the departments is really pretty shocking. You would really never see this in the private sector. So I'm afraid we need to sort of belly up to the bar, understand we need a government structure that will work for a city that's significantly larger than what we have had and what we're going to grow into, and pull things together so you have the communication. We have a lot of inefficiencies clearly going on with departments doing things that would be far better served if they were collaborating. So I'm prepared to do a pretty significant overhaul and restructuring of our governmental structure here.
I think we need to continue the trend of being more external facing instead of internal facing, and I think you can do that three ways. One is collect even more data and use technology to be an even smarter Nashville, to borrow that phrase. But if you think about it with codes department, how do we put computers in their cars where they're spending more time out in the field responding to code requests rather than having to come back to the office? So how do we collect that data? How do we use technology? And then second, how do we be even more transparent with that data? LA, now you can track your permitting process from the time you submit it to the time it's approved. Many of you in development know that you would rather have your permit when you know it's going to be approved rather than a general, well, sometime between April and June. So how do we use that data and technology, be transparent? And then the human capital question. See Rick Bernhardt here, Billy, Tommy Lynch. We have an incredible group of folks who have given a lot to the city who may retire, who are planning to retire. How do we incentivize and bring smart young people, people who are committed into government?
This time.
Got it.
Yes, this is all about a smarter Nashville. This is all about looking at the processes we use today and making them even better. And I do applaud the work that has been done. You know, Nashville Next is a great example of that. The work that's been done by Terry Cobb and the codes team in integrating with others. But this is a continual process. You always have to go back and optimize and optimize. And so I think it's a great question. So as we look at how do we make this mobile, that's going to show you exactly how we integrate better. Step back and say we want everyone to have an app in their hands that's a native app that allows them to work through government, to have the information they need, even to be proactively given to them so they can make better decisions. Well, then that causes you to take a blank sheet of paper and create a process that works effectively and more efficiently, and then you decide which parts of those you want to implement. This is the exciting and really the great opportunity for us in our metro government, and it is very centric around the citizen and around all Nashvillians.
You know, I mentioned earlier we were the National Property Management Company of the Year, but one of the things that we're most proud of at our company is that we have had 2 National Resident Managers of the Year. We're the only company that has had won that award more than once. We've got 2 employees that have won that. And the way we manage our employees and the way we communicate what we want done is that we have well-defined goals. That works in business and it works in government. You know, when you step into that office, you're going to have 90-something boards and commissions of people that are already appointed and in position for, in some cases, as long as 6 to 8 years. So the change in those commissions is going to come slowly. I think what you've got to do is communicate your goals and monitor progress, the same thing that each of you do in your business every day.
As a result of my representation of the Music City Center and also on behalf of private developers and private entities, this is actually something that I thought a lot about. We've got 53 different departments and agencies. It looks to me that we have an organization that is set up to respond to priorities and issues and constituencies of 25 years ago. What I'd like to see us do is come back and break up the responsibilities of a deputy mayor into 3 or 4 different people that each have different portfolios, whether that's education and children and family issues, whether that's transportation, economic development, tourism, et cetera, and then allow those departments and agencies to all fit in a clear lane. That doesn't mean that everybody's in an exclusive lane, but I think that would encourage some of that cooperation and some of that communication. What I find from time to time is while we try, our departments and agencies don't always do a good job of communicating with each other. And it's not turf battles, it's more they're just not set up to talk to each other. So I think there's a lot of efficiencies we can bring to bear on the current organization and the current setup, and that's something that I've thought a lot about.
Ashley, our next question.
Hi, my name is Mark Deutschman of Village Real Estate Services and Core Development Services, and also I'm the president of Greenways for Nashville. My question is, when our Greenway system was launched 20 years ago, Nashville pledged to have a greenway within 2 miles of every neighborhood. Walkability is now regarded as a valuable asset for all neighborhoods, and Greenways for Nashville is now 60% towards our new goal of being within 1 mile of every Nashville neighborhood. What are some concrete steps that you would take to realize this goal?
Okay. I'm going to ask Mr. Gentry if you would lead the round, please.
Okay. In 1 minute, I will tell you one concrete step. And I think one thing we need to look at is developing communities around our greenways. We bring our greenways to the community, but how many times have we actually taken the same approach we do with our transit thinking and our rail thinking and develop neighborhoods around our greenways? And I think one thing I would do is to look at doing that. It would create a community with open space, with the ability to move, not just within the community, but into other communities. And there's a lot of open space around greenways, so that's one thing I would look to do.
What I mentioned earlier how much Nashville has improved in my lifetime, especially in the last 10 or 20 years, the development of greenways is an important part of it. It's part of the city that our family uses quite often. And what I would like to see going forward, in addition to what you're talking about, getting more proximity between greenways and where people live, is also the connectivity issue between the greenways. That, to me, is the most exciting scenario that you guys work on, is the opportunity to move through the city on a greenway program. That, along with biking facilities, where I think we're kind of woefully, we're almost nowheresville, frankly, in our biking facilities. I think combining that with a more robust and continuing to expand the greenways is how we'll improve the quality of life here. So thank you for all your work on that effort.
I think one concrete step that I would take is thinking differently about our parks and greenways and what constitutes a park or a greenway. I've been telling the story quite a bit. We live in Sylvan Park. We're less than a mile away from our greenway. We have a 3-year-old daughter, and when we go to play with her, used to when I had free time to go play with her, we would not go to Sylvan Park Elementary School. We'd go to Richland Park, or we'd go down to the new McCabe Community Center because it's safe, it's well lit, it's well maintained. Our schools have an incredible amount of open space that right now are not being sent as the message that this is your community space. At Sylvan Park Elementary, we have a rusty fence around it that when you look at it, you almost get tetanus. So how do we pull down those fences? How do we open up that space and say, this is not school space, this is park space, this is community space? So when we talk about getting within that 1 mile, when we think about McGavock High School and that open space and that track, and that could be a greenway, that could be a park, that is something as mayor that pulls those departments together for open green space and parks.
Mr. Rebrovick?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this goal of having greenways within 1 mile from every resident, but I would take it a step further, and let's say what percentage of our land is going to stay land. They've done this in other cities where they've said 20% is going to continue to be land, and then everybody in the community rallies around that, and they focus on that goal, and so every decision goes through that criteria first before you make it. I love the transportation corridor project that the Greenway team, Mark, you are working on. I think it's fantastic to take the connectivity around the I-440 corridor and give us a way that every neighborhood participates in that, and that would fit right in with that goal of making sure we have a certain percentage. I also love our parks. I've grown up in Centennial Park, I've grown up in Percy Warner Park, I've grown up in Shelby Park, all of our parks, and they are so important to our future. So that's how I would do it.
Okay, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you. I've spent a lot of time with the Parks Department and studying what we're doing, what improvements need to be made, what potential expansion can be made of those systems. Our parks and greenways are in great shape. They can always use some more energy and some more money and some more creativity, but I think we've done a pretty good job providing greenways. We've still got some room to go, Mark, and appreciate everything that you're doing. I was in Metro Center Saturday afternoon, beautiful afternoon, and it amazed me how many people were utilizing that walkway over the levee. It was just a constant stream of people coming from downtown and from East and North Nashville, connecting into that and walking on that greenway. So I think it's something that our city and community utilizes. It's something we need. We need to finish the plan, and I would be a strong supporter of that.
Okay, Mr. Brown.
After listening to Jeremy, I feel like a bad parent for letting my kids play over there. Not alone. Hush your mouth. You cut into my time. I'm biased on this issue. My family and I are big users of the greenways, particularly right there at the Richland Greenway. But one of the things I think about, I love the statistics that show we're moving towards 80% being within 1 mile of a greenway, 90% within 2 miles of a greenway. My family must be the exception. While I love to run over there, it's about 3 miles from my house. There's no sidewalk to get there, so it's not incredibly user-friendly for us to get there. So when you visit with people like Phil Ponder, who get a lot of respect, and Mark and others who helped birth this idea and continue it forward, their eyes light up about the possibilities of how we connect people to the greenways and how we connect greenways with greenways. I think there's other opportunities that can be brought to bear in the city, but we know with the parks and with the greenways, we continue to add to our inventory of that, but we also have to add towards our budget to help us maintain that. But I think that's a great opportunity for the city, and I love what we've been doing.
Thank you, Ms. Barry.
Thank you. I actually have had the pleasure for the last 7.5 years of sitting on the Metro Council with Charlie Tigert and Ronnie Stein, who both believe that they were the ones who created greenways. And
don't tell them I didn't say that.
I won't. But when they talk about it as this really nascent idea that started, that got traction, and it has taken us 20 years, and we have been able to build what Mark has described as this ability to connect to neighborhoods. But going forward, we have to create design and connectivity, and that means using public projects to access more green space. So when we built the new baseball stadium, we've included green space and connectivity with the greenways to that. We've looked at and built on the Riverfront Park, and we've connected there as well. So as we look at where we're putting money into public expenditures, that's part of the connectivity, that's part of making sure that we take that 3% of open land and put it up to closer to 16%, which is what Austin does. And ultimately, it is about budget. Parks has been cut a lot, and we need to put more money in there.
Thank you. And to stay close to time today, we have time for one more question from the audience.
Good. I'm Laura Reinbold, geoprofessional engineering with Terracon. And I'm also a public school parent, 24 years with 4 children in the system. So I'm going to touch on the question that Mr. Fox and Mr. Kane touched on earlier. As ULI members, we know that we can do all that we can to build the city, but without quality public education, we're going to hit a lot of stumbling blocks. What do you see from your perspective is lacking K through 12 that you'd tackle in your administration?
Mr. Fox, we'll start back with you, please.
Laura, thanks for your question. As I said earlier, it's been amazingly conspicuous by its absence, the conversation of public education. We have a lot of very successful things that are progressing in public education, as you know. We've seen significant, steady achievement gains in our traditional schools. We're seeing some pretty extraordinary performance by some of our charter schools as well, especially serving children with various kinds of disadvantages. I think what I learned when I was school board chairman, the role of the mayor is uniquely positioned to be a catalyst for change. Too often our school board does not really work with the type of urgency that we would hope, and the role of the mayor can add that urgency, hopefully in a friendly way, sometimes takes a little sharp elbows. But I'm pleased to say I'm good friends with the majority of the school board members, tight with the new awesome Commissioner of Education, and that's what kind of motivates me every morning when I get up, is the possibility of accelerating the gains that we're seeing in our public school system.
Thank you.
I'm just going to forewarn you, you're going to have to shut me down on this one. So let me be very brief and very quick in that 2 things. One, as David said, the role of the mayor is to have a vision. The mayor is not in control of the schools, but they are in control and working with the community to set that vision. And I think one of the most important pieces that the next mayor has to do, and I plan to do, is go to higher education. That whether you're a charter school, a STEM school, a magnet school, an independent school, we have to have more high quality teachers, and we have to have more high-quality principals. Whether people are retiring, every year we have to recruit 500 to 600 new teachers that come in. I applaud Lipscomb right now. If you want to graduate with a teaching degree, you have to have an English language learner certification. We should commend that and work with TSU, work with Vanderbilt and Trevecca and Belmont and other universities, because we are only as strong as our best teachers are in our classrooms. That would be a key focus, and it's time that we make that connection with higher education. I lied, I got it in.
You got 5 seconds left. And they don't roll over.
Ms. Rebrovick.
Yes.
Laura, thank you for that question. I am a proud product of our public high school system all the way through K through 12, and so I am very excited, impatient, pushing forward on making sure that every child gets a quality education in our public schools. I point to 3 things. Number 1, the teachers and the principals. We have to empower them, not only make them accountable, but we have to empower them to make decisions at the local level so that they can run their schools and get the right solutions with their parents and their students. Number 2, this is a cradle to career opportunity. It really is outside the 4 walls to make sure that we bring children together and give them after-school programs that will help mentor them, that will keep them in a safe environment, that will keep them focused on a career or on college and get into colleges like the Top Floor program, which is phenomenal. And third, it's about technology. We need to make sure that we have smarter schools, and so they're learning on technology so they know what they need, have a skill that they need in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Freeman.
As I've traveled around the community for the last 6 months and visited numerous public schools, I have been overwhelmed with by how good these schools are, how engaged the teachers are, how great the students are as I visit these schools, the facilities are. You know, we get Nashville public schools get a bad rap, and some of that comes from the surrounding communities. They as they recruit industry into Williamson County, they say you don't want to send your kids to a Davidson County public school. I think what we've got to do, there's a reason that the President of the United States came to Nashville and spoke at a public school. The First Lady came here and spoke at a public school. I think what we've got to do is highlight the successes, and there are many, many successes in our Nashville public school system. I think we've got to lift them up. I asked Dr. Register about funding. He said at 41% of the budget we're adequately funded. We're just not getting a fair shake, and we're not giving our public schools a fair shake and a fair description of what's going on in them. So I would try to change that dialogue.
Thank you, Mr. Bone.
I think when you look at the statistics statistics and the demographics that our large urban school system is serving, I think in many respects we're asking the school system to outperform the odds. And that may not be an unfair request, but it needs to be one that we're brutally honest about as a community. And to say these can't just be school system priorities, they have to be community priorities. The school system and those teachers and those principals have those children 8 hours a day, 180 days a year, which is about 20% of a child's life. The question I have as mayor is, what can we do with the other 80% of a child's life? What can we do with after-school programs at nights, weekends, summers? What can we do to help families? We know we have some great programs in this city, whether it's through the government, like the NASA program through the library, or what the parks are doing, or whether it's in some of our great nonprofits, whether it's Big Brothers Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Clubs, Oasis Center, Shalom Zone, etc. But as a city, we have to increase the capacity to help and to serve those children who are most at risk when they're not in school, and to make this a community priority, not just a school system priority.
Okay. I believe that fundamentally that public education is the most critical thing a city government does. It's the foundation of our democracy. And if you look at where we are right now with our education, we do have some great schools in Nashville. We have some that are ranked in the top for this country, right alongside failing schools. And since I only have 1 minute, let me just talk about one particular initiative that I believe in. I believe that every child in our metro system needs to go to pre-K, because that pre-K will make them college and career ready. If you are not coming in with pre-K experiences, you're not going to be able to be successful. We know, because we have limited resources, that if you take those dollars that you're spending on pre-K, for every $1 you spend, you get a $7 return. Because we have to be innovative, because we have to be creative about our resources, as a priority as your next mayor, I will make that happen, and we will not leave any children that we do today on a wait list for pre-K.
Yes, sir.
My sister and I are both graduates of Metro Public Schools. Daughters number 1 and 2 are graduates of Metro Public Schools. Daughters number 2 and 3 and 4 are currently in public schools, and their mom is the chair of the public school board. You asked what is missing, and my answer is a collaborative effort around public education. We all are working very hard for public education in our silos, but we do not have a collaborative effort. It's too much fighting outside of the school system about what's best for the public schools, and we need to come together and determine what's best for those children. And so that's what's missing. And since I'm the last speaker, I want to thank each and every one of you for allowing us to come here today, and it's been a wonderful experience for all of us. Thank you very much.
And we want to thank our candidates as well. And we want to thank you. You all were talking faster than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs today, and we appreciate that you stuck within our time limits. So we appreciate that, and let's please give them a round of applause. I want to remind you that Davidson County Election Commission is outside. Our panel of leaders, you each are successful in your own right. It's been an honor serving as your moderator today. I want to close with a quote from former First Lady Rosalind Carter that I felt was appropriate for some of the tough issues facing our city. She said, "A leader takes people where they want to go. A great leader takes people not necessarily where they want to be, but where they ought to go." And with that, Jimmy has a couple of words.
Thank you, Tabitha, and thank you to our committee. I think they did a wonderful job presenting the questions for the candidates. They were very, very well scrutinized, I can assure you, watching this the email trail. One thing about this organization that we're all very proud about is on May the 20th, we have our annual awards banquet at the Omni Hotel. We'll have hopefully about 500 people there. I would like to invite all the candidates and their spouses to come as my guests to see what this organization does for this wonderful city. And it's not 2-minute questions and answers. It's actual bricks and mortar in the ground, highly scrutinized, thought out, well-financed, et cetera, everything about them is fabulous. So please, we'll get with Rose, but I'd like for all y'all to come to see what this organization provides for this city, because it's tangible and you can touch it. Interestingly, one little last comment. Tabitha, thank you so much. You did a wonderful job. 15 15 years from now, the Titans Stadium will be up for renewal for lease. I know a couple of the chatter this morning earlier was the Titans are the lead story on CBS News that the Titans were up for sale. I think we all have followed the last couple of days with Tommy Adams resigning. I remember when Carl Dean first came into office, we were at Leadership Nashville Retreat in Monteagle, and first thing on Greg Highnote's plate was the renewal of the Predators lease. So I think that's one question that was not brought up today that will be part of the debate in the future. So just be thinking about it. Maybe we'll get y'all to answer online with our ULI, but that's something that's going to be facing this city. The Titans are very important. The city is a Titan sold. What do we do about the lease? How do we retain the Titans? And with that said, thank you very much, and we appreciate y'all coming today.